What can new Wild defenseman Zach Bogosian do for the Wild decor? Plus, what do we think of those new potential pairings? When will Jared Spurgeon return? And what do the Wild need to do to beat the New York Rangers this evening? We discuss all that and more on today's pregame preview edition of Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked On Wild.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new content throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we dive into the Zach Bogosian trade, what he brings to the table, what he can help with that the Wild need, and what it means for the pairings for the Wild going forward. We'll also take a look at tonight's matchup against those pesky New York Rangers, and we'll talk about all of the injuries that the New York Rangers are currently dealing with. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and coming to you from the XL Energy Center, not here for Wild coverage, but here otherwise. And so figured I needed to get an episode in for you. We had the extensive breakdown of the Calen Addison trade yesterday, and so if you didn't have a chance to check that out yet, I encourage you to go back and listen. Full breakdown of why the trade happened and what it means for members of this Wild decor going forward. So if you missed it, I encourage you to check it out. And since we had the opportunity yesterday to go full heavy into the Calen Addison trade, wanted to talk a little bit about Zach Bogosian and what he brings to the table here today. Number one, he's old, 33 years old, and comes to the Wild from the Tampa Bay Lightning, in which he spent the last 3 seasons with Tampa Bay. Obviously a Stanley Cup champion with the Lightning. And I say he's old in jest because I know that's the big thing, is that the Wild's got older and slower by trading Calen Addison away to the San Jose Sharks. Look, the Wild need some size in their decor. Their strongest and most physical defenseman is Jake Middleton. And beyond that, you have cardboard cutouts of basically the same player all throughout that lineup. And so they add a guy in Bogosian who's going to play on that third pairing. And I found it interesting that Bogosian talked specifically about the fact that things have maybe gotten a little stale with his role with the Tampa Bay Lightning over the last couple of seasons. And I mentioned this because Pat Maroon said the exact same thing. Joe Smith talking about that earlier today on Twitter, that Pat Maroon cited that exact same thing when he came from the Tampa Bay Lightning, in that you kind of get into the same routine. And I know it's a Lightning team that is off to a good start this season, but you know, those guys are not going to get the opportunity to really elevate in the lineup at all because of what Tampa Bay has in front of them. You see what Pat Maroon has done since he came here, getting an opportunity to play a little higher in the lineup, and he has it's more than paid off. Now, is that going to be something that keeps going as the season goes on? It remains to be seen, but I think there is something to the fact that veterans getting a new opportunity and more of an opportunity seem to have a little bit of a jump when they go to that new team. Bogosian is going to be a third pairing defenseman. It's not like he's playing top pairing minutes. It's not like he's going to be, thrust into these key critical roles. He's going to be playing third pairing minutes. He'll probably help out some on the penalty kill. And I guess the biggest endorsement for Bogosian is that he's not John Merrill, which means that John Merrill will not be in the lineup here tonight. We'll see Dakota Mermis, we'll see Damon Hunt, and we'll see Zach Bogosian as well. Now, what happens when Jared Spurgeon is ready to return, which sounds like could be Sunday at the earliest for the Minnesota Wild? Well, I think we'll see Damon Hunt potentially moved out, although it seems like there's some rumblings behind the scenes that John Merrill is running on borrowed time and that he could be sent elsewhere once the Wilds get back from the road trip so that they can get a fresh body in to be their seventh defenseman for the meantime. I'd be hugely in favor of that. We've talked about it a lot over the last couple of months. And so we'll see what happens there. But main point is Bogosian's going to play. He's a big body. He comes in at 6'2", 222 pounds. And what he doesn't have in speed, he should be able to help in one of the critical areas for this team, that being keeping the front of the net clean. This Wild team has struggled mightily over the last couple of years, keeping the front of the net clean. And now you have a guy in Jake Middleton who can do that, but Bogosian now can bring some of that as well. So for the fact that it cost a 7th-round pick to go get a guy with playoff experience, that's big and should be able to help this team in the physicality department. I know a lot of people will roll their eyes at the grit and physicality, and if you do, that's fine. I just know that he is going to better serve this team than John Merrill did. And so the fact that this move, regardless of what you think about what happened with Calen Addison, the fact that this move precipitates getting Merrill out of the lineup, I think needs to be looked at as a positive. So now you will, when we see Spurgeon back, we'll likely see Mermis and Bogosian as your third pairing defenseman. And honestly, going from that, from what we had at the beginning of the season, which was Calen Addison and John Merrill / Alex Goligoski, you got to feel like there's improvement in that third pairing from what we saw early on in the season. Will it work? Will it help stabilize some of the goaltending numbers and some of the numbers that we've seen from the Wild defense so far this year? That remains to be seen. But at least Bill Guerin is making moves to try to help upgrade that critical weakness by this Minnesota Wild team, and we'll see what Zach Bogosian's able to do to help out with that. Now, the New York Rangers coming into tonight, as you heard in our episode earlier today with John Chick of Locked On Rangers, they're banged up. And so we'll talk about that as well as the keys for the Minnesota Wild to beat said New York Rangers in tonight's game. That is all on the way after this here on Locked On Wild. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Jace Medical. And look, there is a lot going on in the world these days that can impact supply chains. And when supply chains are impacted, that may make it more difficult for you to get access to medication that you need in the time of emergencies. Jace Medical is here to make that experience as stress-free as possible by offering you a Jace case filled with 5 essential medications that can treat all sorts of deadly infections. You can also personalize your Jace case to fit a variety of needs. And if you're looking for something to get for your family members for the holidays, you can get gift cards for Jace Medical so that they can personalize a Jace case of their own. Make sure that you head to jacemedical.com. And if you use the promo code Locked On, you'll get $20 off your purchase. Again, head to jacemedical.com. Use the promo code Locked On for $20 off of your purchase. Jace Medical, delivering you peace of mind with their Jace case. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is also brought to you by Parkview Advance. As a business owner, you realize there are times when receivables might fall behind. But that doesn't mean you need to fall behind on vendor payments, payroll, or rent. For more than 25 years, Parkview Advance has helped businesses secure working capital. From $5,000 to $1.5 million, Parkview Advance can approve your working capital in as little as 24 hours. It's a much easier process than you might imagine. Jace Medical, Parkview Advance invites the many entrepreneurs that are Locked On NHL fans to learn more by calling them at 203-675-0071 or go to parkviewadvance.com. If your business needs working capital, call Parkview Advance today. Go to parkviewadvance.com. Parkview Advance, helping businesses with their working capital. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, unfortunately, no postcast tonight with me covering state high school sports, but we'll recap some thoughts from tonight's game and get you set for tomorrow's matchup against the Buffalo Sabres. Minnesota Wild tonight, as we heard from John Chick earlier today, they're a little banged up. And so Adam Fox still out of the lineup. But I think the biggest thing is that the Minnesota Wild will face Louis Domingue in net for the New York Rangers here this evening. And Domingue, a journeyman defenseman, obviously no Jonathan Quick, no Igor Shesterkin. And so it's an opportunity for this Minnesota Wild team that they need to capitalize on, because you've got a net presence that is not as solid as the Rangers typically do. And we saw the difference that having good goaltending made for the Rangers in Saturday's matchup, that the Wild won 5-4 in a shootout. Had it been any less than A-plus effort from Jonathan Quick, the Wild likely end that game in regulation with how strong they played down the stretch. And so the Wild need to keep that rolling as they look to try to make it 3 wins in a row here on the road against the Rangers. And so let's take a look at the keys to the game for tonight's matchup against the New York Rangers. Number one, it starts and ends with the offense. The offense is the one that can help out the defense and help out the goaltending, although Marc-Andre Fleury has certainly stabilized things in net for the Wild over the last couple of games. But again, it starts and ends with what this team does offensively. If they're able to push the attack, if they're able to roll 4 lines heavy at their opponents, they're a hard team to stop. We know now what the blueprint is for this team to be successful this season. You've got the Kaprizov, Boldy, and Rossi line. You've got the Hartman, Zuccarello, Johansson line. You've got the Maroon, Foligno, Eriksson, Ek line. And, of course, you've got your fourth line guys, Brandon Duhaime, Connor Dewar, and Vinny Lettieri. Just attack this Rangers team and just be relentless in terms of getting pucks in the zone, make it so that their best attempts to push the puck up the ice is into the neutral zone, where they quickly cough it up and the Wilds go right back on the attack. You're not going to have appearances in which you get 93 shots on net very often. And so if the Wilds can simply just continue what has been some very solid play for them in the offensive zone over the last 2 games, that is really going to create some problems for the Rangers, especially on defense. Number 2 for the Minnesota Wild, let's see what these new defensemen can do, especially Zach Bogosian. Let's see what he can do to help this team out defensively as they try to shake off this early slow start. If you can get some good performances from these guys, continued good play from Dakota Mermis to help out Marc-Andre Fleury and net, that's going to lead to some really good things for this Wild team. And special teams. Let's not send the Rangers to the power play 5 times. It's a numbers thing. And yes, I know the penalty kill started to look good, but the penalty kill is only as good as its previous successful kill. And you have to go, for every 1 or 2 power plays that you give up, you have to go on a run to get those numbers back to stabilized of like 10 or 15 straight kills just to balance out the statistics. And so let's try not challenging the penalty kill as much as has been over the past few games. But if I know anything about this Minnesota Wild team, there are going to be tons of penalties in this game, because there was a little bit of chippiness in the game against the Rangers on Saturday. And so it wouldn't surprise me if we get 1 or 2 fights. Wouldn't surprise me if Bogosian tries to get in on some of that in front of his new team. It's just going to be, can you survive it? And can you not get completely carved in the special teams department for this team here tonight? And on the power play, it's going to be a work in progress until the Wild find something that they really like. So let's just see if that 5-forward power play group gets some consistency here in this one tonight. See if they can get some chances, can capitalize, and can get one in the net behind Louis Domingue. But I think first and foremost, the biggest key to this matchup is to attack the net unmercifully until you can get 3, 4, or 5 behind Louis Domingue and really get off to a good start here in this one tonight. Now, of course, I say that, and it's going to be just my luck that it ends up being the other goalie for the Rangers here tonight. And so I guess we'll see which one we get, but it's going to be interesting to see how this game goes, because it's a banged up Rangers team that you should beat, but we know that they looked over the last couple of games. It's a team that is still in their back pocket to get off a full start and to struggle to commit penalties, commit turnovers, and to fall behind early on. So let's get a strong start, a hot start on the road, just like you did against the New York Islanders, and ride that to a dub. We'll see how things play out. I have a reaction for you tomorrow. Again, no postcast tonight. Apologies, but on our duties this evening, so I'm not going to be able to bring you that to you after the game, but we'll have things as locked in as we possibly can throughout the rest of the night and the rest of the week. Make sure you take the opportunity to subscribe to Locked On Wild. If you haven't already, follow us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new content throughout the course of the rest of the season. We have new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.